Most modern farming, in the US anyway, generally happens at a very large scale. This has allowed us to produce commodities cheaply and abundantly. But this commodity model also can be a race to the bottom to see who can squeeze their margins the most. Some farmers, like Steve Strasheim, are taking a different approach.
As of any business, you always have to think, what are your advantages or what is your resources? And mine is I like talking to people. I mean, that's kind of, in a way, probably why we ended up with the agricultural system that we have, is a lot of farmers just want to sit in the tractor and they don't want to talk to people. I think there's a lot of farmers that are going to maybe have to face that reality, in the coming years.
Steve's Twisted River Farm is only about 3 acres that serves a very local area. That might not sound big, but it's a real and profitable farm business that directly serves the people of his rural community.
I set off doing this because I wanted just to farm and I didn't want to work for anybody anymore. I wanted to work for myself. I feel like this has really ingrained us into the community. Those relationships all became because of this. And so just the community part of this is what really drives me now.
Steve Strasheim of Twisted River Farm talks about making a living on fewer than 5 acres through direct consumer relationships on today's Future of Agriculture podcast. Hello, fellow Ag Nerd. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of the Future of Agriculture. My name is Tim Hamrich, and every week you and I get to hear from the farmers, founders, innovators, investors, the people shaping the future of the ag industry. Totally unique and wonderful episode for you here today with Steve Strasheim of Twisted River Farm that I think will make you rethink how much land is required to actually make a living farming full-time. But before we dive into that, let's take just a minute to recognize our quarterly presenting sponsor, which this quarter is Case IH. Now, as most of you already know, I'm fascinated by the way technology and innovation are shaping the future of agriculture. That's why I do this podcast. But it's also why I'm excited to partner with Case IH this quarter. Case IH designs, engineers, and produces cutting-edge farm equipment based on a comprehensive understanding of farmers' needs, wants, and challenges, integrating these insights into their development and manufacturing. For example, take their model year 25 Magnum tractor. The new Magnum is purposefully designed to answer farmers' needs in every design and engineering choice. Improved horsepower for pulling heavier loads faster, bundled, integrated, and ready-to-go precision tech for greater accuracy in the field, and a transmission farmers can tweak for improved control and performance in different tasks. That kind of design thinking is exactly where the future of ag is headed, and that's why you'll be hearing me talk to folks at Case IH at different points throughout this quarter about what they do and how they're working to push ag forward. So thank you once again to Case IH for their leadership in ag innovation and for supporting the Future of Agriculture podcast. All right, now back to today's episode with Steve Strasheim of Twisted River Farm. I've followed Steve on X for quite a while now, back when I'm sure it was still called Twitter, and I have really been looking forward to getting him on the show for a few reasons. First, Steve focuses on a totally different model for farming that is just radically different from the commodity mindset. Instead of economies of scale being the priority, his top priority is connection with his customers and delivering them value. Because of that, he's been able to build his business without the two biggest barriers for most people who want to get into farming: access to a lot of land and a lot of capital. It's more of the bootstrapped version of getting started in farming. I've seen this model that they call market gardening work in a lot of other cases. There are well-known YouTubers, people like Curtis Stone up in Canada, that have inspired countless others to pursue this version of farming on small sections of other people's land and then building a business around these customer relationships. I can remember myself watching these videos by Curtis Stone and being inspired by what he's doing. And that was probably, a decade ago or so. But I thought this was a model that really could only work in urban areas that had a real affluent consumer base that really wanted to buy local. In Steve's case, one of the things that's impressive about him, he's doing this in rural Iowa. Mitchell, Iowa, to be exact, is where he's located, about 12 miles south of the Minnesota border. Steve first became interested in local food in 2013, and then in 2014, he began raising chickens. He raised chickens exclusively for the first couple of years, and then in 2017, he ditched the chicken project for vegetables, which he said proved to be a much better fit for him from the very beginning. Since that time, he's grown his operation to a few different locations in the area that total around 3 acres of borrowed land. He pays mostly in produce. Although when I spoke to Steve for this interview, he was in the process of buying a 5-acre property of his own to centralize his operation. Steve's just a great example of what it takes to build a direct-to-consumer business from scratch. His model includes growing produce most of the year. He has some hoop houses that help him to extend his growing season. He sells at a couple farmers markets and then through a CSA, which stands for Community Supported Agriculture. Those are the subscriptions that customers pay to get a box of fresh produce, in his case, either weekly or every other week. He also sells through some grocery stores and restaurants, but especially since COVID, he says his focus has mostly been on the direct sales to the end customer. And all of this in very rural Iowa, which kind of blows my mind. I'm super inspired by Steve, and I could go on and on and on here, but why don't I let him tell his own story? Enjoy this conversation with Steve Strasheim.
We started kind of as a hobby back in around 2013, 14. I wanted to be a livestock farmer, and I had no business doing that. I had no land. I just was enamored with the idea of like pasture raised. I grew up on a sugar beet farm in eastern Montana under kind of the conventional agricultural model with big equipment, big land, all that stuff. Left the farm, went to college, no real dreams of ever being a farmer. So agricultural world kind of refound me in a whole different view. And so I really took an interest with like the work of Joel Salatin and, some of that earlier stuff is what kind of got me into the local food, world and interest in all that. And just started kind of poking around. We bought some meat chickens and didn't really think of doing it as a business. But my wife started posting some stuff on Facebook and some friends were like, hey, if you got some extra chickens, we'd buy them. And that's when the entrepreneurial light bulb started to flicker, so to speak. And thought, hey, that was kind of easy to sell 100 chickens. Maybe we'll do 200 next year. And then that really got the juices flowing of how could I do this full time someday? This is just really something I want to do. And that's where I kind of stumbled into the work of like Curtis Stone and, some of those other YouTube personalities. So we started very small in a very rural area. We're in a area of Iowa. Our 4-county population is about 100,000 people, very spread out. Mason City is kind of our, central hub of our business operation, and that's 30 minutes away. And that population is only about 26,000 people. So not big populations we're working with here. If you do any research on market gardening, you'll see there's a lot of content out there about urban farming. And that's kind of the work that I started looking at. And so I basically overlaid urban farming onto a rural area. So we weren't farming like a corner of a urban deserted block or in a back alley someplace. We were just using small plots in a very rural town. And that was our strategy to enter, because if you've done any looking at Iowa land prices in the last, 12 to 15 years, there is no way we were buying conventional land to do something like this. So, and it's worked out well. Started with about, a little backyard garden that was a couple hundred square feet, kind of made that work to about a 1/4 acre of space. When we bought the place that we're currently living on, which is an acre of property, we took 1/4 of that and put it into production. And then just through basic, good old fashioned luck, the town that we moved to here, Mitchell, is only 124 people, and just started meeting guys around town. They have a little Thursday night beer get together in a garage and started kind of hanging out and that. And it was through that I actually, hey, I got an acre over here. It looks kind of like you're doing something cool over there. If you want to do something with it, just go ahead and do it. Not going to charge you anything or anything. Just, I'm tired of mowing it. And through that, we kind of got up to about 3 acres of production space over the last 5 years or so, 4 or 5 years. And we're actually in the process of buying a 5-acre plot now. So we'll be able to kind of centralize our whole operation onto one piece of land. So hard work pays off. It takes you a long time, but it pays off.
Oh, that's so cool. You hear of, obviously like your neighbors, right? Your Midwest row crop farmers farming thousands of acres with, 2 full-time people. for market gardening, how big of an area is a full-time job for one person?
A quarter acre. The X factor is debt. If you have low expenses, you can make a lot of money on a quarter acre. And when I say a lot of money, I mean the general kind of metric, you should be able to, without really doing a lot, 60,000 an acre in revenue, not hard to do, and then you kind of quantify that onto like a quarter acre where you can go vertical with all sorts of value add stuff. You could do honey, you could do mushrooms, you could do microgreens, you could do market garden, you could do chickens. I mean, you could stuff a lot onto a quarter acre, and a lot of stuff that doesn't frankly take, any big time, labor hours on any one little thing. So you can really vertically stack your enterprises.
And so that's in terms of financially. What about in terms of like your own time? Like how much can you handle by yourself with your system?
In the early days, a lot. I mean, I was working till 7 or 8 o'clock, but I was running purely on passion and adrenaline. Like if you asked me to do that now, I'd say, no, go jump in the creek. I'm not working. I work till 5 o'clock now. If I don't get it done by 5, it can wait till tomorrow, and so those early years, yeah, you got to cut your teeth and probably work some more hours than you want to. But when you're building, at those initial years, you get a lot of fuel from and motivation just from the pure adrenaline of it and the fear of failing. And so I didn't really care how many hours. I didn't track them. I didn't want to know in the early years. So,
and the content that you were consuming sounds like it was a lot of kind of urban market gardening type content. Curtis Stone, I believe, was in Vancouver, somewhere up there.
Kelowna, British Columbia, I think is where he was at. Yeah.
But, in my mind, as I see that type of stuff, I think, oh, yeah, that works because they have very wealthy urbanites that all want to pay a premium for their product. What made you think like that model could still be successful in such a rural area of north central Iowa that you're in?
I definitely thought a lot about that, and how we can make it work. But I really didn't crunch the numbers too hard. My wife and I were going to like a couple of the local farmers markets. There are some older people bringing produce and stuff like that. And to me, the glaring obviousness of there's nobody really doing this. And I didn't really know what those numbers meant. I was getting, kind of some false confidence probably from some of those YouTube videos of talking about, oh, we're selling to these restaurant chefs 50 pounds of lettuce a week, which if nobody knows lettuce quantities, that's a lot of lettuce, to any one buyer anyway. And I'm thinking, oh man, if we even do half of that, oh, yeah. Fast forward to what I really know now, we don't have a single restaurant that's ever bought more than 10 pounds a week from us. So, in our neck of the woods, we just don't have restaurants that run that kind of volume. But anyway, so yeah, not knowing the numbers is probably almost better when you're doing something like that, just because I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I thought, well, this is all possible. I'm just going to try it and see how well I can do with it. So,
yeah. Talk to us about that first year. Your wife said, okay, you got a year, figure this one out. How did you approach it, and what were the big kind of learnings from that first year of trying this?
So in 2016 and 17, microgreens were kind of a fad, and they still, some farms are still doing it. We do a little bit of them yet. We're not nearly into them as we were at that time, but our business was really built on the back of microgreens in those first year because they didn't take up a lot of space. I literally started doing it in our basement on a couple of grow racks and a couple of shop lights I got at, Menards or whatever. So I started kind of doing that while I was doing a full-time job yet in 2016 or 17, because it didn't take me a lot of time, and they were very profitable. I mean, you could buy a bag of seed for a couple bucks and turn that into a couple $1,000, over the course of 6 months, so it was a very low investment and it was really profitable and not a lot of time. So it worked really well to kind of do it as a side hustle for a couple of years. So that kind of gave me a little time to evaluate what the market was out there. I was taking a day off of my full-time job to go do a farmer's market on a Friday afternoon. In like 2017 or 16 and 17, I did that. And so that gave me kind of the chance to go and experience farmers market and see kind of what the potential was before I really jumped in. So I had a pretty good, or at least what I thought a pretty good idea what the potential was if I had more time in the day to jump in and go full time. So that first year, my eye was just on the prize. That clock was ticking, and I say she gave me a year, but it wasn't more like here's the X on the calendar kind of a thing. It was just like, okay, you got a chance, go for it. And so my eye was just on the prize. I didn't want to let her down. I wanted to do this, and so I just worked and did everything I could to get our product out there. Started doing more farmers markets because I thought that was the best way, not only to infuse cash quickly. It's time away from the farm, it's risk, to do farmers markets, but you meet a lot of people, you get a really good core customer base, right? Almost right out of the chute, especially like in our farmers markets where there wasn't a lot of competition. Now, I can't speak for other, bigger markets and other markets that might not be the case, but for ours, and I have a sales background, so talking to people was kind of my bag, and I loved going to the markets and showing people our product and what we were doing. And so it just kind of clicked. And that first year, didn't make a fortune, didn't replace my full-time income. We had a little savings, so I had a little buffer there, but it was proof of concept and basically got another year.
Keep earning that one more year, right?
Yeah, one more year. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you said, you kind of thought farmers markets were the way to go, and they were helpful in a lot of ways. What have you learned since then about the different ways that you want to have kind of markets available to you?
Well, we still do both of those markets to this day. Our markets are still solid. I mean, you hear a lot like in the industry, in the niche vegetable world, about CSAs, about farmers markets, and how all those models have went through their various eras of decay and comeback. And I don't know. I think it's hard to paint a typical model with a broad brush and say, oh, farmers markets are dead, don't do those anymore. That's not the case everywhere. And maybe this little market, you can still make that work. CSA models kind of were the huge fad. And I think nationally they've seen some, decline over the years just because people want more choice or whatever. And those models have changed a lot, but a lot of farms still do them. We do one, so I don't usually prescribe to this style of doing things is completely dead when it comes to direct marketing. I think you just kind of have to try them, see what what your resources are, what you have available to you. If you have a little market that looks like it could use a little life, well, get involved with it and put some life into it. I mean, I did that with the Mason City Farmers Market. I mean, it was kind of a dying market, and I jumped on the board, and it's taken us 5 years, but now we have a nice little vibrant market. That's our farm's best selling market as a little market, just because you can get in and shape it how it best fits you. So there's opportunities out there, tons.
And so you do the farmers markets, you do CSA, and then I know you do also restaurants and grocery stores too, right?
Yeah, we started pretty heavy on those, again, because of what I was seeing on YouTube. That's what a lot of YouTubers were doing. We're selling to restaurants and we're starting to get into grocery. That was kind of the hot thing. And so we really started heavy on those two market channels, and no regrets there, did well with them. But then as we started seeing progress on the direct side with farmers markets, my interest started to wane down on doing wholesale, at least in our market. We just don't have that level of demand on the wholesale side. And then COVID was an X factor there in 2020. And that just lit a rocket underneath the, direct to consumer and local demand. And so we, at that time, we were in about 13 to 15 restaurants fairly regularly. And, they closed all of them literally overnight with those shutdowns. And so that's where we pivoted to doing the CSA and like home delivery out of necessity, because like, how do we replace 15 restaurants worth of, business literally overnight? And one other channel that we just added in 2024 is we built an on-farm store. So now we have our own retail outlet here on the farm. And so we don't do as much of the wholesaling. We still service a couple restaurants and one little grocery store, but mostly it's all direct, either through our own store, farmers markets, or our CSA.
And what are you noticing about the end consumer that, either you expected or that you've been pleasantly surprised? Like, who are they and what are their big motivations for wanting to support Twisted River Farm?
Um, we've spent a lot of time analyzing that and creating, kind of our avatar customer. I think that's important for any kind of direct to consumer type is who's my customer here? Who's my ideal customer? And so we've spent a lot of time kind of creating that, who we're talking to, what do they typically like to buy, that kind of stuff. And I think our consumers still are fairly what you would think they are. I mean, mostly female is kind of our big in that 35 to 65, range, usually a little more affluent and a little more on the higher income spectrum or, middle to higher income spectrum. That is pretty, I don't want to say maybe universal, but I think you're going to hear a lot of farms like us say that. But I would say in the last couple of years, we're seeing a lot more younger families and people that are taking a lot more interest in local food. And I don't know if that COVID was maybe the real driver of that, but yeah, I remember pretty vividly prior to say 2022, going back even 5 or 6 years before that, having conversations as kind of our area local food community. We were having conversations about how do we get more young people to come out to the markets? How do we get young people interested in buying local food, like the early 20s, the mid 20s? And we all kind of just thought, well, they don't have the income to kind of meet what local really requires. So maybe those just aren't going to be customers of ours until they develop into their life cycle a little bit. And it's not why, maybe widespread, but we're definitely seeing more of a shift. Like summer of 2024, I had a lot more, I don't ask them their age, but what I can assume were mid 20s to late 20s, early 30s, moms bringing the kids, looking for kohlrabi, stuff like that. Just didn't see that 2 years ago as much.
Right, right. And out at the farmers markets, revenue wise, what's an average day look like, or what's a good day look like? Can you give us a range?
Yeah, so that's very market specific. That can change, what we do on a good Saturday, say mid to end July. That's kind of the peak, just availability and what demand is for produce. You really don't start seeing really good market days until tomatoes and like cucumbers start coming on. And then you start getting sweet corn, and then you really go up. And then as that everybody gets sick eating that stuff, then it starts to dip down. So that end of July is peak. At peak season, we might, between two markets, we might bring in, say, 3,500 to 4,000 on a Saturday between those two markets, which there's farmers around the country that's not even worth getting out of bed for them for one market on a bad day, so it's very region market specific. But for us, that's a good day. And building in all those other market channels, we can make that work. I know a couple of farmers I've met online and through conferences and stuff, they're in bigger markets, and 6,000-7,000 on a Saturday is not, that's not hard for them to hit at all at one market. So very, very specific on your area and your farmer's market.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And on the CSA side, how often are they getting a delivery or a box or whatever you would call it? And what are they paying for that?
We kind of look at how we charge that by a per week. I mean, CSAs, there's a lot of different ways to look at a CSA. There's not a one, and that just continues to change with new software that allows customization and, different things like that. Are you getting it home delivered? Are they picking it up at your farm? I mean, there's just a million different X factors in there. The way we look at ours, we started ours, again, in light of COVID, doing home delivery. So people didn't have to, the work from home crowds and all that could take advantage of not having to leave the house ever again. And we just sunsetted home delivery after the 2024 season. We're actually moving towards a drop site model, which is a little bit more common than home delivery, only because our CSA was getting so popular that just the time, to do home delivery, we could hire another driver, or we could do that stuff. But kind of looking at the long-term arc of that, I just thought, maybe we'll take a little bit of a hit on the customer count this year, but I'd rather kind of rebuild it on a pickup model versus home delivery model. It's just easier to control your growth with the pickup versus delivery, where home delivery in our area worked really well just because we could kind of do a loop where some markets that wouldn't work at all because you're jumping all over town and just no rhyme or reason to it. It worked well for us, but just the long term, looking into the future and the sustainability of that market channel, I just thought, I'd rather not have to worry about, making up delivery routes that we don't know, week to week or year to year what they're going to look like. So.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And what'd you say they pay a week?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So we build ours by a per week. We charge per the year, but we kind of look at it as what the value of the contents are in a box per week. We do a bi-weekly or a weekly box. Some farms you have to get every week. We've kind of went to the weekly or bi-weekly. We do only one box size where some farms allow people to do a small, medium, large. And we tried that. And we kind of just found people were kind of get in the middle, and so just to simplify it on our side and make it a little bit less labor and thus cheaper, we just went to a one box size and then just allowed the weekly or bi-weekly. And that way people could kind of meter if they weren't going through their stuff quite as much, they'll just move to the bi-weekly. And that's actually what most of our customers do is bi-weekly. And so our box price, we base it on at a $30 per week price. So our weekly, what does that come out to be? I think we're at 16 weeks this year. So that's like 560 or 580, somewhere in that neighborhood for the weekly. And then the bi-weekly is like 285, which would be 8 boxes throughout the summer. We used to do a spring CSA as well, which we would start around the 1st of May and then finish that up when the summer one started, like mid-June. We didn't do that this year because of our farm store. Last year, our farm store, it was insanely busy in April or late April and early May. And we were actually having a hard time with product. Like we had so many people coming to the store but the CSA is priority because they already prepaid for that stuff. And so then we were like running a little short in the store. So we kind of decided to cut the spring CSA out, which is only 4 boxes anyway. So not a big loss there. And then we do a fall/early winter CSA, which picks up in October, November, and December, and seeing a lot of growth on that end of it too. So definitely like the CSA model. It's hard because you have customer attrition. So you got to replace customers every year. So you got to really think about that and how you're going to, manage that attrition, and can you afford to that attrition, if you don't have other market streams. There's some farms out there, they only do CSA farming, they don't do any farmers markets, or, they'll maybe throw in a little wholesale to kind of round it out and fill in some gaps or whatever. I don't really want to do that because again, in our market area, we just don't have that kind of population to really put all of our eggs into one marketing basket. And I'd rather have option A, B, C, D to sell to rather than A or B. And what happens if, look back at COVID, if we had only been doing restaurants, and a lot of farms got caught in this, that were only selling to restaurants, and then the shutdowns happen for who knows how long, what do? You're screwed. You don't have any other options to go to, where we were able to very quickly pivot and didn't lose a step and only grew from there.
And it's cool that just in general that you've built this, diversity, this resilience in your customer base. And I think that's sort of one of the big messages of what you're doing versus a conventional farmers. Like maybe they're banking on the local elevator, local ethanol plant, and those two things have to go really well. For you, you've got these different places you can go. What about on the production side though? How do you make sure that you're able to consistently produce and deliver to all these people in any given year? I'm sure that's something that on your mind quite a bit.
Yeah, it's not easy. There's a learning curve. I mean, seeds want to grow, right? A lot of times I joke with people when we talk about gardening is a lot of times we just have to get out of our own way. You put a seed in the ground and it kind of wants to just do its thing. And we kind of over baby things sometimes. But when you need to have that product every single week, then it takes a lot more work and management. And I think one of the pitfalls with especially like the CSA model, I've heard it being said before by speakers at conferences and stuff, do not do a CSA your first or even probably your second year, because the pressure is just unreal and you don't know how to grow. I mean, yeah, you can put some seeds in the ground, but to make sure that you have it every single week and know what your succession looks like and what your planting dates are. That changes. I mean, what my dates and my microclimate is here in Mitchell is different from a farmer I know 50 miles south of here. Our dates are different. Everything, you can't look at that. You have to find it out on your own. And that takes a couple of years. What varieties do well, what your customers want. What we started with in the early days was me mimicking what Curtis Stone and what his crop, a lot, and not just him, but other farmers I was watching on YouTube and reading about on Facebook. And I was growing things that if you asked me today if I would grow them, I'd say no way. But we did it then, and we kind of sold some of it. But you got to get to know what your customers want, and our customers are very Midwesterners. We like vanilla ice cream and mashed potatoes, and that's about it. And so we have really changed our crop plan over the last couple years now to be more generic in terms of what we grow. We grow a lot of just red tomatoes, sweet corn, green beans, cucumbers, and we grow a lot of it. And even our CSA, we've made very well known to our customers in terms of our CSA that we call it very staple forward. You see a lot of CSA farms out there that are putting in different varieties of zucchini and purple broccoli and all this kind of stuff. Our customers don't want that. There might be a handful that would try it and, it's adventurous, but we tell our customers this, you're getting staple items in our CSA box, and we might throw a kohlrabi or something like that in there once in a while, but you're not going to see real adventurous stuff in our box because that's not what our customers typically want.
How have you handled the organic thing? I'm sure you have customers ask you, are you organic? Why or why not? And how have you handled that?
Not as much as I kind of expected, honestly. We do get asked once in a while. Our biggest question that we ever get is, do you use pesticides? That's kind of actually the question that's resonated probably the most over the last 5 or 6 years. And you only hear at farmers markets because you're at one-on-one with your customer. We've never chosen to certify organic. We practice organic practices. We've been really fortunate not to really need a lot of that stuff. Like our pest pressure has been pretty low here. Not that we don't have pests, but the only real big crop ruining pest pressure we've had, like total loss, would be flea beetles on summer brassicas like arugula, some of the bok choys and stuff that we were growing. And quite frankly, our market doesn't really want that stuff anyway. So we just stopped growing it, and so that was our workaround for that is we could have sprayed or spent the labor to go put insect netting over those beds and shovel dirt on them and stuff. Our market just doesn't like brassica greens. We sell some, but not we could sell green lettuce every day, all day long. There just seems to be an endless demand for lettuce around here. But if we mix arugula into it, people don't want it because it's too peppery. It's too spicy for our delicate palates here in the Midwest. So we just don't like arugula here. So we just stopped growing that stuff. And we still grow some brassicas. We don't grow as much kale as we used to. The kale fad kind of came and went. So we don't really do much kale anymore. We do cabbage and stuff like that. But the flea beetle will nibble on the young leaves, but as soon as they kind of get those bigger outer leaves, they kind of leave it alone. We don't really have too much cabbage moth pressure here. You see a little, there are those little white butterflies that kind of float around a little bit. We had a little bit last year, but we overplant by about 25% on everything. So we kind of just, if we have to give them 25% and keeps them happy and we don't have to spray, then I'm happy with that. So. And we used to tell our customers too, like when we had some of those spring green brassicas, I call them spring green brassicas, but like the arugulas and stuff, we always used to kind of use the bug damage as a little bit of a marketing angle in saying that, well, if you see holes chewed in the leaves, that tells you we didn't spray because the bugs ate them. So that tells you we didn't spray.
There you go. Turn into a positive.
A little bit, yeah. And so people are like, oh, okay. Yeah. And then I always just say, well, if you find a bug in your bag, we won't charge you for the extra protein.
And I do think the more pressing question on their mind is, has this been sprayed with pesticide? That just seems to be what's in the vernacular in general right now.
And we do put that when we were still doing a lot of grocery, and we're still in one grocery store, sometimes two, and we label all of our lettuce bags with a label. We put on there no pesticide on our label, even though it doesn't really mean much anymore, I guess. But I mean, it does. But I used to really put a lot of emphasis on our labels. We used to pay a lot of money to get nice labels made for our bags of lettuce and in our microgreens because we were sitting on big box grocery store shelves, and those labels are doing the talking for you. So you better put some thought into them about what you're putting on those labels. And so we used to put a lot more thought into that language on those labels than we probably do now, just because we're dealing more face to face and can have those conversations with people directly.
Yeah. And you seem to like that part, the face to face interaction.
Definitely do. Yep, yeah, definitely do. Yeah. As of any business, you always have to think, what are your advantages or what is your resources? And mine is I like talking to people. My wife kind of laughs at me sometimes. She's like, I don't know how you can stand at the market say the same stuff over and over and over again. But I enjoy it. I always say it kind of pumps my tires up for the next week when you can stand there and have people tell you how great your stuff is and then hand you a big sweaty wad of cash and put it in your pocket and go home with. I tell you what, that keeps me going for the next week here. And when I hear people say, oh my gosh, your tomatoes last week, I told my friend about them. They were so good. And we had to come back and get some more. I tell you what, I could float on a cloud for the whole week after hearing that, even one time. So, I mean, that's kind of, in a way, probably why we ended up with the agricultural system that we have, is a lot of farmers just want to sit in the tractor and they don't want to talk to people. And I think there's a lot to be said around that conversation about, especially as we sit here in 2025, and there's all sorts of chatter on Twitter about what does the future of agriculture look like? And, there's a lot of talk about some farmers converting to direct sale. Just listened to JR's podcast with Vance Crowe this morning, actually, and I made a little tweet about it. And there's a perfect example, selling kind of into commodity. Now he's transitioned into doing direct to consumer. And listening to that podcast is just like, I think there's a lot of farmers that are going to maybe have to face that reality, in the coming years. I don't know. I don't know what the future looks like, but a lot of people are talking about it. And I think that's something that they maybe don't really think through, is like, I might have to go talk to people now.
Well, the last kind of topic I was hoping to tackle, and this is another one that could be a whole episode of its own, is labor. And so I guess my first question is, how have you handled employees for your business?
So the first couple of years, it was just me, and I didn't really know what the future looked like in that regard. I didn't know when was the right time to bring somebody in. I heard of one farmer one time, I don't even remember who said it anymore. It was like, you'll know when is the day before you drop dead, hire somebody. And that's how you know when. And I don't think I quite approached that point. I brought somebody in, but a neighbor had a high school age daughter that wanted a little summer work. And so I kind of brought her in one summer, and that was she's a good worker, showed up every day. She lived close, so there wasn't, just as easy. And that kind of got her feet wet with, what do I actually need help with? And what can I entrust somebody to do, take my mind off that and go do something else? And so that was a really good experience. And then just through meeting people, met Jolene. Jolene's a retired school nurse, and she's super active and could run circles around me. And she's been with us now. I think this will be her fourth or fifth season. And she's just introduced us to people in town. She knows she always says, if I didn't wipe their nose, I've wiped their kid's nose, being the school nurse. And so she knows everybody. And she's been a great, great team member. I mean, I don't even think of her as an employee. She's just an awesome lady. And I always say, I don't know what we would do without Jolene. She's just a tireless. I mean, she doesn't work here full time. She just does a couple days a week, morning or afternoon or something like that in the main season. She was actually just here yesterday. We were cleaning the greenhouse, getting it ready to start up, and just a great, awesome lady. And she's actually helped us find a couple of our other seasonal employees. She had a friend, Lori's been here now just about as long. I think one same year or maybe the year after Lori came on, and Lori's around her same age, and she just loves to be in our pack room. So she'll come and stick her ear pods in and pack and label bags of lettuce and wash things and pack things. And she could do that all day. So we have her come in just one day a week in the main part of the season to do packing. And then we've been kind of filling in the gaps with a couple high school age kids. We're going to be upping that a little bit with that new land purchase I was referring to earlier. We're going to probably have to up our numbers a little bit, and I'm hopeful, but we're not immune to those, labor growth challenges, I don't think. And so I'm hoping that we'll be able to find some bodies to handle that. But we've mechanized some where we can. We've invested into like the paper pot transplanter. That's helped a lot in terms of like the transplant time, because that takes a lot of time. If you don't have like a water wheel planter and a tractor, which we weren't at the scale to need that, you're on your hands and knees popping plugs in. Well, with paper pot transplanter, if anybody's not familiar, is a Japanese invented tool that's been around since I think the 60s or 70s. I think been around a long time. It came to America probably in the 90s and got really popular with Curtis Stone and some of those guys we were referencing earlier in the podcast. Really made it popular on YouTube, and then it just exploded, and now everyone's got one of these things. And basically you just plant your seeds into like a paper tray that looks like a honeycomb in the plastic tray. So it looks very similar when it's in the greenhouse to what your typical cell plug trays would look like. But when you take it out to the field, you put that tray on this orange caddy looking thing, and you kind of pull it backwards towards you, and it's kind of angled. The chains unfurl and go into the soil as you pull it backwards. And then it covers the soil with some press wheels behind it. So there's no real moving parts to the thing other than a couple little wheels on it. And you can transplant as fast as you can walk backwards. And it's just a slick tool that has cut hours and hours and hours off of our transplanting. Again, there's no silver bullet tool in the toolbox, and I will preach that. That's my hill to die on. There's no silver bullet tool out there, especially in agriculture. If you have your soil conditions just right and everything's clicking, that tool is amazing. I hate it just as much on the days that it's not working right, when the soil tilth isn't right, when the moisture level's not right. So I love hate with the thing, but I mostly love it. And that thing has changed the transplanting game. What used to take two of us an hour to plant 100-foot long of lettuce now takes me 7 minutes by myself. And I don't have to crawl on my hands and knees. It's just slick. Just little things here, nothing made. No, we just have run a very lean farm. We don't own a tractor. Our cultivation is done mostly with walk behind tractors like the Planet Junior. And we invested into the a Grillo, which is like a BCS walk behind tractor that you can put different implements on. It has a PTO shaft on it, so it operates much like a 4-wheel tractor, but it's just like, it looks like a tiller. It's got handlebars and 2 wheels, but you can turn the handlebars around so the implement can be either going out the front if you're doing like mowing, or out the back if you're doing like tillage equipment. So very, very versatile tool. Love that thing for doing some soil prep and some soil amendments. And we got a flail mower so we can take out old crop and just chop it and drop it. So we kind of compost in place now. That kind of goes back to that fertility question a little bit. We just chop and drop old crop. We do not take it off, and then we just incorporate it in. And then before we got that machine, we even got the Planet Junior, which I just love the Planet Junior. It looks like a tiller. Again, it's got a handlebar and a couple wheels, but there's no gears on it. It's either you're going forward or you're not. You just pull a lever and you go, and your speed's kind of adjusted by your throttle. But you can put different tillage equipments behind it. It doesn't have a PTO, so you're not tilling it. You're just dragging cultivation equipment, and you can set those up with shanks and beat knives and duck feet and A-blades and finger weeders. Modern cultivation equipment on a walk behind tractor. And so we can cultivate at walking speed. I used to call it using Santa Claus herbicide, ho, ho, ho. We don't use the Santa Claus herbicide anymore, really. Maybe some spots here and there, but mostly it's with the walk behind Planet Junior. We've set up all of our row spacing, all of our beds to be able to run that thing over our crop or between the crop. If we're using like black plastic, we can cultivate in between the black plastic if we want to, and not have to spray that if we don't want to. So it's a simple, cheap. I think I paid $800 for the main tractor, and then I put a new engine on it, which is $300 on Amazon. So about $1,100. And Tillmore, which is a great company out of Ohio, they're actually making equipment for these things, modern day equipment for these things. I mean, these Planet Junior tractors, like the one I own, was built in 1949. So old tractor with brand new implements on it. And it's just, we've created a system using the paper pot and that Planet Junior. So now we can transplant and harvest mechanically. And so that takes out hours of labor. But we haven't decreased the amount of people on the farm. We're just being able to allocate their hours to other things, value adding, with labeling and bagging and all that kind of stuff. And that shifts our ability to be able to grow things that need more hands-on labor, like picking tomatoes and pruning tomatoes and, cucumbers and stuff like that. So it just shifts the labor to something else that we can do more of and spend less time on those tedious, mundane tasks that nobody wants to do anyway. Like in the old days, and the crew would get here and I'd say, okay, gang, grab a hoe. We're going to go out to the field and spend 3 hours out in the blazing sun hoeing today. And it was like, ugh. And I was the same way. I didn't want to do it. Well, now with the Planet Junior, now we rock, paper, scissors. Who gets to go and do that? Because it's kind of fun.
Well, I still have a dozen more questions, so we'll save them for maybe a round two with you at some point. But maybe just end with this one, which is, what's the number one reason people trying to do what you do seem to fail?
Just one reason?
Or the most common that you've seen?
I think the biggest one is trying to change the world. If you can really refine it down to one thing. People taking on too much debt is probably like on the physical side of things. People just take out way too much debt, way overestimate their abilities, what their market is, what their demand is. I can sleep good at night knowing that I don't have a bank payment to make tomorrow, and so that's how I sleep good at night. It's made us grow slower. Like if I wanted a new piece of equipment, I got to save up for that. I can't just go and get it. And, in those early years, it was frustrating. In hindsight, I'm so glad now that I was patient and let it grow that slowly because we just haven't had those worries. So I would say, I think some of the small farmers that think they're going to go out and change the world, I just think I was probably one of those farmers too, but I think that's the biggest cause of pain and sorrow in some of those farmers' lives when they don't achieve that goal like they thought they were going to. Reality hits you really, really hard in the face your first couple of years, when you're setting out to change the world. I think that's where a lot of the burnout comes from. And I see it on Instagram. That's my whole Instagram feed is just nothing but farms. And I don't really spend that much time on it anymore. I used to love looking at Instagram as kind of an offshoot of like my YouTube education. I used to learn a lot just from following farms and seeing their progression and looking what their, I had this, Chris Jager and I were talking about this on his podcast, if I remember right, or maybe it was we've talked on the phone many times. Our educations come from doing sleuth researching on other farms' YouTubes and Instagram and Facebook pages about where's their farm in relation to their market. Like I'll hear about some farm or I'll see him on YouTube or somebody says something or I'll see him pop up on Instagram. I go on YouTube or Google Maps and I satellite view their farm, not to see like what it's, maybe some a little bit how it's set up, but I want to see how far do they have to drive to market that? Like what's that? I'll look at where their CSA drops or where's that restaurant they're talking about? How far is that? And how it really gives you a glimpse into like how their business is set up when you can kind of overlay it on a geographical sense. And Chris and I were joking about how when we're selling into grocery stores, we used to go and count the competitor boxes of like the big, like the Earthbound boxes. How many boxes were they buying this week? And so you'd go do those little sleuths, to learn this stuff. But anyway, farmer burnout is a real deal when it comes to small farms. And that's where I was going with all that is when you look on Instagram, I see it often. I saw a couple this winter local farms here in Iowa, nobody around close to me, but around, when I say local in Iowa here, farms that were either really scaling back or quitting because they're burnt out and they're trying to do too much. And who knows what that problem, where the problem maybe was. Maybe you're spending too much time, probably a combination of time and money would be my guess. That's usually what it is. And not knowing what those actual answers are. It's just speculation and impossible to know. But yeah, don't try to change the world. Change your community. That's what my North Star, I guess, with all of this is. I set off doing this because I wanted just to farm and I didn't want to work for anybody anymore. I wanted to work for myself. I feel like this has really ingrained us into the community and woven woven us into the community, in a lot of communities around here, not just the one that we live in physically, but, the markets that we serve are very active in, the farmers markets, or I'm on boards on another community, and I've just gotten to know those relationships all became because of this. And so just the community part of this is what really drives me now. And I just, I love that a lot, and, hope our luck continues.
That is awesome. Oh, this is so cool. Steve, your story is inspiring, man. I've really been fired up listening to this. It hits on a lot of things that I've been thinking about a lot myself. So thank you so much for taking the time, and especially for the extra time I've asked of you here. Thank you.
Not a problem. I'm happy to do it, and really appreciate the opportunity to come on and tell everybody my boring story.
Well, I think all of us agree the story is not boring at all. In fact, I had trouble editing this episode down because I just found everything Steve's doing really, really fascinating. I look forward to having him back on the show again. I think this model speaks to something interesting, and Steve alluded to it, which is, boy, if the commodity market isn't going to turn around, and if we are entering a period of deglobalization, and if we do need to find more domestic demand for the products that we grow in agriculture, what does that look like? And this direct relationship Steve has with his customers, it's intensive, and it's, I'm sure, very, very time consuming to have as many interactions with his customers as he does. But in some cases, you're listening to what it takes to kind of get started and to make a living in this industry. And I don't know, I could see a lot more opportunities for people like Steve who like to talk to people out there to get started in farming and build a business around their customers instead of around the scale it takes to compete in the commodity market. So anyway, thought-provoking episode there. Thank you very much to Steve. He is a must follow as far as I'm concerned on X if you're there. I'll leave a link in the show notes for where you can go follow Steve, but also check out his website, twistedriverfarm.com. And if you are ever finding yourself in northern Iowa, make sure you go pick up some of Steve's produce at the local farmers market. So thanks again to Steve for being on the show. Thank you as well to Case IH for being our quarterly presenting sponsor this quarter. And last but never least, thank you for your time and your attention. I do not take it lightly. I'll be back next week with another story of ag innovation.